Hi, I'm Sue from Garden Moxie. Welcome to my pollinator garden. This year I've continued to build my pollinator-friendly garden, and I've learned quite a lot. Today I'll share the plants that keep this garden buzzing with life, and one that didn't quite live up to its promise. Let's turn the camera around and dive into what plants attracted pollinators, and what plant I'm kicking out of the garden next season. Pollinators are the unsung heroes of our gardens. These tiny, often overlooked creatures play a crucial role in our gardens and the wider ecosystem. Without them, many of the plants that we love simply wouldn't be able to survive, let alone thrive. In fact, about 75% of the world's flowering plants and over a third of our food crops depend on pollinators like bees, butterflies, and birds to reproduce. That was my motivation for creating a pollinator-friendly garden. By providing a safe haven filled with the right plants, we can help support these essential creatures. It's a small but significant way that we can contribute to the health of our planet, right in our own gardens. Today I'm excited to share with you the plants that brought the most buzz to my garden, as well as one plant that really didn't live up to the promise. The first plant I want to share is Calamintha Nepeta. This white-blooming Nepeta is a pollinator magnet. By far, this plant attracts the most pollinators to my garden, hands down. This plant is teeming with life all day long once it blooms. It adds a great fluffy texture to the pollinator garden. The plant is perennial, and I purchased 2 plants from Bluestone Perennials in the fall of 2022. This plant requires full sun and free-draining soil. It grows in zones 4 through 9. This plant was the Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year for the year 2021. It attracts a wide variety of pollinators in my garden, especially honeybees, and it has proven to be deer and bunny resistant for me. The second plant I want to share is Millennium Alium. This plant has globe-shaped rosy purple blooms that open up in late summer. Even before the plant blooms, it offers a unique shape to the flower border, with its glossy grass-like foliage and circular flower buds. This low-maintenance plant is a perennial that is heat and drought tolerant. It forms tiny clumps that can be easily divided so that you can propagate more plants for your garden. It is a short allium and only reaches roughly 18 inches tall. It grows in zones 4 through 9 and requires a full sun to mostly sunny position. It requires normal, well-drained, or sandy soil to thrive. This plant was the 2018 Perennial Plant of the Year, voted by the Perennial Plant Association. And unlike most ornamental alliums, this hybrid isn't prone to excessive seeding. The third plant I want to share is one we've discussed on this channel before, Verbena Bonariensis. This plant is considered invasive in California, Oregon, and Georgia, and it will self-seed freely in the garden. Here in my cold Michigan garden, it is not invasive. Verbena requires full sun, and it grows in zones 6 through 10. It has tiny purple flowers on top of strong, airy stems. This season, the deer in my area have sampled a few of the flower heads, but this plant tends to be deer resistant. Verbena blooms from midsummer to late fall, and this plant is an absolute butterfly magnet in my garden. It also attracts bees, moths, and hummingbirds. When I was filming this video, I was treated to a quick visit by a yellow finch who perched onto the verbena right up until he saw me. The fourth great pollinator plant I grew this season was a native bee balm called Monarda Fistulosa. I talked about this plant on this channel before. I wasn't sure I wanted to keep this plant in the garden because it was covered with powdery mildew once it started blooming. At that point, I was convinced I would replace this plant. That was until I realized that after it stopped blooming, it was a magnet for yellow finches, which are one of my favorite birds. This plant is also an absolute bee magnet. It attracts butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds as well. I visited a local native meadow and noticed that this monarda grows in very small patches and that particular Monarda didn't have powdery mildew like I saw in my garden. There's no doubt that this plant is a complete eyesore in my pollinator garden once it stops blooming. I decided I'm going to divide this plant into much smaller clumps for next season, rather than letting it create a really large clump. That's kind of how I saw it looking in the native meadow. I'm going to replace the larger clump of Monarda with another plant for next season. I still haven't decided what that plant's going to be. If you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. That brings us to the fifth plant that's doing a great job of attracting pollinators in the garden this season. This plant's common name is Kiss Me Over the Garden Gate. The Latin name is Polygonum Oriental. The variety is Cerise Pearls. This plant lights up the garden with its cascading floral tassels that draw a wide range of pollinators. And it's not just a showstopper in the garden, it also makes a great cut flower. All the plants that I have in the garden this season self-sowed from last year. They do self-sow quite freely, so you'll need to take care to weed out any unwanted plants in the spring. In my garden, this plant really attracts wasps. One of the drawbacks from this plant, however, is it also attracts Japanese beetles. So if Japanese beetles are a problem in your garden, just be warned ahead of time, this might not be the plant for you. So the sixth plant that's performing well at attracting pollinators to my garden is sweet Joe Pye Weed. This plant is native to my area. It attracts butterflies, bees, and other pollinators. And as an added bonus, it also adds a place for ladybug larvae to grow. This plant is native perennial, growing in zones 3 through 8. It blooms during the months of August and September. This plant is typically deer resistant, but this season I actually had a deer sample one of the plants, as you can see in the photograph. You can see how it's shorter than the other plants and the flowers are much smaller. But once it did that to one of the plants, for the most part, the rest of the plants have been left alone by the deer. The next plant I want to share is one that I grew from seed this season, Gomphrena, or Globe Amaranth. Gomphrena is an annual that comes in shades of white and varying degrees of pink. It makes a great dried flower and can be used to decorate the house through the winter months with dried bouquets or even wreaths. I grew these plants from seed. This specific variety is called QIS Pink. Gomphrena is considered an annual and blooms from the summer until the frost. In my garden, it is a magnet for different moths, as well as bees and other pollinators. The flowers are a great pink with a little bit of a white on the tips of the flowers, and they're a great round shape, a very unique flower in the flower garden. So that brings us to the flower that actually let me down a little bit, at least relative to pollinators. Coreopsis. I'm growing a few different varieties of Coreopsis that I'm hoping to use for natural dye projects. And I grew all of these plants from seed. Although the flowers are absolutely gorgeous, I have yet to see any serious pollinator activity on these plants. Honestly, I'm a little surprised. No matter what time of the day I look at these flowers, they typically don't have any insects on them. I think these flowers are really beautiful, but based on what I've seen this season, I'm not going to be adding them to the pollinator garden next year. Another aspect of these plants that I'm noticing is that they have a tendency to be quite floppy in the garden. Based on these traits, I think that I'll be holding off in growing these plants in a different location next season. As we wrap up, I'd love to hear about your experiences with pollinator plants this season. What really worked for you and what didn't? Can you leave some comments below? It would be great if we could all learn from each other and continue to build our gardens to be not only beautiful, but also to help the pollinators. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and I can't wait to see what the next season brings. Well, that's it for this video, friends, and I'll see you in the next one.
Anywhere I feel like